Hello everybody and welcome back. Lizelle, how are you?
I'm great, thanks, Jochen. I'm very excited about this session as this is something that I think is going to be very beneficial to saddle fitters and horse owners. And we're going to be talking about something you call the 5 pencil trick, which I'm intrigued to learn a bit more about because I did try and do some research to see what direction you were going to take us in. And I think I've got an idea, but there's not much out there on this. So this feels very exclusive. So I'm very excited.
I'd like to start off and explain why there's not enough out there, because I use a lot of time terms that don't even exist. And the reason why I do this, you might have that in South Africa too, but there is sometimes people using words like classical dressage or horsemanship or positive reinforcement. And while the person who started that has a good meaning, all of a sudden a lot of people use it. And then you look at it, what they do there on the horse, that's not positive reinforcement. And all of a sudden, before you know, it turns into something negative. So I come across sometimes people talk about balance on the saddle balance. Saddle balance is so misunderstood because when we learn about saddle balance, there's 5 different types of balance a saddle maker, a saddle fitter, the trainer, everybody has in mind. So you can see very often you talk about one type of balance, the customer understands something completely different and they say, I don't like that saddle fitter, or I don't like my saddle anymore because the balance isn't right. So I needed to come up with something everybody can use in the world and do something so that it's easier to understand for people to follow along while they all have the best intention in mind for their horses. So I come up with something ridiculous like the 5 pencil trick. So you won't see it anywhere yet, but eventually, I'm doing this now close to 50 years, so eventually people will say, okay, there we do the pencil trick too. The pencil trick is only something, so you as a saddle fitter, you as a distributor, you as a rider, you as a horse lover, speak all the same language. So let's dive right to it and envision a pencil first in your mind. How does a pencil look to you?
Okay, I'm thinking I've got a pen here, so just a straight
Beautiful.
essentially.
Yeah. So what's the difference between that pen and this pen? They're both pens.
Maybe the length.
Look at the shape. Okay, it's the same shape. Maybe your shape. Okay, can you take the cap off? Or is there no cap? It's off. So you see that little rubber thing on the end for your fingers?
Yes.
It's great to ride, but for the pencil trick, it won't be so good. So this is why I don't call it pen trick, because there's so many different pen. Sometimes the pen is really, really thick to hold it easy in your hands. Thick here, thin here. But in the majority of people, when they visualize a pencil, it's just a unified shape with the lead point in the end. Can you visualize that? Okay,
Yes.
so for certain people, they like a pencil lead you push on the back and the pencil lead comes out, so you don't have to resharpen it. They exist too. But I think the majority of the people, when they think about a pencil, it's a unified shape. So
Definitely,
whatever you use, your pen is not bad, would be good if it wouldn't have that. But if you can find a pen, what you find in hotels, motels, sometimes it's a promotional thing. What you want, you can also use sticks, it really doesn't matter. But you want something what is unified and approximately 4.5 inches long or 12.5 centimeter long. Okay?
Okay.
So once you find a part or a stick or a pencil or a pen what is unified, then there is all these different tricks. Now let's talk about the stirrup bar on the saddle. If you would make a saddle tree as a tree maker, how would you position the stirrup bar on the saddle? A, kick the end up on the saddle so the stirrup leather never falls out. B, let the stirrup bar point downwards So every time the rider does posting trot, the stirrup leather falls off. Or last, C, have the stirrup bar level, horizontal, so when the rider rides, it doesn't fall off. But if he falls off and the horse rears, or the rider falls off and now it's stuck in his foot, you want the stirrup leather to come off. Which of the three options would you, as the saddle maker or tree maker, attach the stirrup bar?
I think the last one.
Absolutely right. So no tree maker in the world, and for many saddle fitters, they don't have the luxury to say, oh, I only fit this spread. Because as a saddle fitter, you get recommended because you're doing a fantastic job. And sometimes the customer really like what they have. Experience with the horse after you fitted their saddle. But their friend doesn't have the saddle you represent. So a saddle fitter needs to be able to have some tool in the box. A pencil or a pen. What works on every saddle. So if this makes sense to you, that every tree maker makes the bar horizontal to the balance of the tree, then you know very quick, is this saddle supposed to be sitting like this on the horse? Like this on the horse? Like this? How is that supposed to sit? That tree maker who made that saddle made it so that stirrup leather doesn't fall off. So when you want to see if the saddle, whatever brand it is parallel to the ground. Sometimes the shape is a little different. Sometimes they don't have that point, right? That relief little clip, the safety clip. Sometimes people never put it up because they never clean it. Okay, and that starts to rust. So I understand you live very close, 10 minutes by walk to the ocean. And everybody who lives close to the ocean deals a lot with air what has salt in it from the ocean waves. So you have a lot of salty area. Sweat, salt, humidity will rust. So most people don't put it up. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely.
Right? So don't focus necessarily on this little clip because sometimes it rusts like this. Focus where your leather hangs in. So the first pen trick is hold your pen against it and see if this is parallel to the ground. If the saddle, if it's stuffing, is it tree width, tree angle, isn't balanced, you can say, okay, your saddle isn't balanced. Have you heard this before?
Yeah, definitely. You want, I think usually we explain to the client, like either it's too uphill or downhill, and they kind of need to be in a balanced position so they're not behind the movement or falling forward or, things like that.
So imagine you can now say to the customer, would you like to do a show jumping or a dressage test or a hack where every time you stand up to your posting trot, lose your leathers? No, why would I? Would you like to have a stirrup leather would never release your stirrup and you might get dragged to death? Of course not. So you want a stirrup leather would release but doesn't fall off while you ride. Yes. And then you ask them the question, in your opinion, should that stirrup bar be level? And then say yes. Then you go to the saddle. And you says, okay, here's your saddle on the horse. Let's lift this up. Okay, and let's look if this bar, can you see the bar? Yes. Okay, and this is the one what is loose, but doesn't matter. You can still see where the stirrup leather goes in. Ask the client, in your opinion, is this balanced? And this says yes, because here comes often a problem. The rider, the coach, the body worker, the saddle fitter, they all struggle with this. For example, the stirrup bar is balanced, but the rider is saying to you, I'm getting pushed forward, lift the front. So you lift the front of the saddle now, the rider says, much better. But what have you created? You have thrown off the tree out of balance.
Yeah.
Okay? Which means now the rider sits behind the 15th rib. Ooh, what's behind the 15th rib? Well, in the middle of the horse's back, no rider wants to sit. Nobody wants to sit at the back of the saddle because that's the front of the horse, that's the back of the horse's spine. This is sacroiliac joint. This is the area in front of the highest point of the withers. So the highest point of the withers to the croup, the most swing is at the 15th rib. So why won't I sit in the middle of the horse's back? So you see all bullfighters, all rodeo riders sitting at the base of the withers. That's where all bareback riders go. So here you can sit, walk, trot, or canter. Okay, that's a quiet spot. So by just having the saddle raised, you now put him in the area. Yes, your rider says, I'm not getting thrown back anymore. And now what did you do? You put the stirrup bar in such a vulnerable area, that stirrup leather comes off all the time. So now you go as a saddle fitter, maybe that wasn't such a good idea.
Yeah.
So how are you going to fix when the rider feels pushed back or forward? See, there comes a new word, the seat balance. The seat balance is created by the webbing. The saddles are strained. So for all our listeners who listen, pretend the nylon strap, the width of your seat belt in your car is attached. One is here, one is attached there. And they start from the back, they go to the pommel and cross approximately here. So they come together to a point. Can you visualize this, Lizelle?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So now you have this hammock of a nylon webbing. So then the next thing the tree maker or the saddle maker does, he puts the same width of webbing across, anywhere from 5 to 7 webbing strips, depends how long the tree is. But I can pull the middle one the deepest. That's called a center balanced seat. That means the deepest point in the hammock would be in the middle.
Yeah.
Let's say I pull the webbing just in front of the middle one down. So now this webbing goes down this way, and then comes, the deepest point is more forward, and then it goes slowly up. That's called a forward balance seat. And the same with the rear, if I pull that the deepest. So we need to understand, why would saddle makers make saddles with different seat balance? Number one is we have different sex. The one rider is a male. Their pelvis axis, the pelvis axis is the balance point of the person's body, because you're not sitting on your feet. Maybe when you do yoga, or hopefully not on your horse. So you're sitting on your butt, right? And if you want to balance yourself on the butt, you balance yourself on your pelvis. So if you want to be not pushed forward, not pushed back, you want to be over your balance point of your pelvis. This is called the axis of the horse. And when we want to go more technical or explain where is it, this sounds horrible what I'm going to say now, but it is, if you take the legs off a person, okay, you take the legs right out of the hip socket where the legs are attached. So the center of the hip socket, from the one hip socket to the other, that's the pelvis axis. Where is your hip socket located in the pelvis? 9 out of 10. The majority, I should go as far as 99.9% of all males are in the center. And exactly the same percentage, 99.9999% of all females are in the front. That is how the hip sockets are placed. You can see some pelvises back there. Okay,
I think I've seen some of your diagrams explaining it.
That's right.
Well.
See, now if I would make a saddle, let's say I live in the country and there's a majority riders are women, and I want to store a lot of saddles, and there is one guy and 100 women who may come to my shop, guess which saddle would I have? The one saddle where I want the deepest point in the middle, or the one where it's in the front? So obviously, if the majority of the women, I want that deepest point in the saddle, more in the front. So I'm looking for a saddle with a forward balanced saddle. So we talked without taking any names here because we don't want to make one company look good or one company better, right? If we want to make one company look good, then I should talk about my company, Schleese. But my point is, as a horse owner or horse saddle fitter, you have to fit all saddles. Okay, so certain brands are really, really popular because they're focused exactly on what I just said. We talked earlier before we started the record button that certain expensive saddles are very popular. And they have focused for a long time to put the seat balance more forward because the rider now sits in the saddle, doesn't get pushed forward because they're sitting in that forward balance. But if you sit in the saddle, okay, and the stirrup bar is level, fits everywhere else, but you fall forward, the problem is not that there is too little stuffing in the front and you need to lift it up. The problem is not there's too much stuffing in the back. The problem is not this width or this angle doesn't change. Is not right. The problem is they're sitting on the saddle where the deepest point should be here, but it's here. So now they're falling in this hole and they constantly lean forward and they feel it's a problem of the saddle. They're looking for their balance point. So it is harder explained by just talking like we do right now, but is immediately understood the second you feel it.
Yes.
Is that, can you imagine? I would have a saddle out of cotton and lamb, sheepskin, cotton and sheepskin, a saddle made of cotton and sheepskin. And you have a saddle where you can change the tree width, the tree angle independently or the same. You can change the balance with the flocking or the stuffing or the foam, and you can change the feet. We call that a therapy saddle or sizing saddle. Imagine you would have a saddle where it is lighter than 40 pounds. So I think it's 5 kilos or 10 pounds. Very, very light. So you have a saddle that you can fold up in the suitcase. I mean, you live in a country where it's very large. But let's say you're flying somewhere. Let's say you're going somewhere and you need to give somebody feel. Wouldn't it be nice you have a tool besides your pencil? You can give the rider the feel, says, okay, this is balanced. Now I'm going to put the right seat balance in here. Now sit on yours. Oh my God, I'm balanced. This is the easiest thing I have said. This is worse. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say, no, I definitely have those moments where you have riders who've actually been very hard on themselves. Their trainers have been very hard on them because they just can't get it right. And then you put them in something that they're not fighting the whole time and they actually can't believe the difference. And it's like there's no looking back from that. So once you've felt it, you don't even need to explain anything anymore.
No, it's for me, there's nothing worse doing something or spending money on something or trying to be good at it. I know I can do it when I have good example. I want to call my wife and I call, goes easy. But if I have not a battery anymore and it's not working, I get frustrated. So, and then somebody says, why can't you get in contact with it? And I know it's this year what's stopping me, right? So if I need to use a phone, for example, if I know it's the saddle what's stopping me, there's nothing worse to continue paying for all the horse and riding lessons and all the costs what's associated with horses when I know my interface. You got a human being on the top, like a living thing, and a living thing on the bottom, and in the stuff in the middle is the saddle. So now the horse knows for a long time it doesn't work or not. But for you, it takes just to feel the right thing, like you just said.
Yeah.
Make sense? Right?
Definitely, yeah.
So this is definitely what I recommend for everybody. We call it the Kira system. I'm going to contact you after this recording to show you a little bit so you understand it better from a fitter point of view. But for our listeners, I want you to understand is always challenging when you have two beings, one with a vertical spine and one with a horizontal spine, They want to be
Yes.
together as one. And if whatever balance that horizontal and vertical spine is not doing its job, you struggle. And like you said, it's frustrating. Okay, so that was just one pencil trick, and I make sure that I will tell you all of them. But I wanted you to really understand from your point of view as a fitter and from the listener's point of view as a rider, sometimes when I feel I'm off balance, if I create something, I make sure I don't create something new. Like all of a sudden the stirrup leather falls off all of a sudden. And I sit on the 15th rib. I don't feel like push forward anymore, but I feel like this is not working. You made it worse. So you're frustrated, the customer's frustrated, and for sure the horse will be. So we need to understand, where do we start? Start with the stirrup bar. Right? That is how the saddle was made, no matter what brand it is. Okay? No matter if it's further back or in the front, that's where the tree was meant to be. Now, to make these things worse, do you know that sometimes, especially here in North America, they breed a certain horse specific for cutting horses? Cutting the calf away from the herd. Cattle.
Yes.
Right? We call them quarter horses. They're bred with a very high butt and low front. You know where they got the name from? Quarter horse?
Is it because their hindquarters are so big? I don't know.
Very good. The hindquarters are so big. They're also the fastest horse on the quarter of a mile. So when they go quick to the cow, bring them back, they stop and go. You know, if you ever seen the competition they do, cutting, right? It's unbelievable how the horse crouches down eye level with the cow and they cut the calf off the herd where the calf wants to go back to. So when I sit on a horse what has this downhill, how do you think I feel if the stirrup bar goes that way too, or if the rider feels like I fall down the hill? So I create a saddle. Let's say this little phone adapter here is the saddle. The saddle has to create a platform, but is parallel. So in order to find that, right, I need to have also my horse in vision. I give you the complete opposite, a driving horse. Do you guys have, maybe not because it's so hot where you live, maybe not so much on the coast, but you have Friesians? Have you ever seen horses?
Yes.
Friesians?
We have a lot of Friesians, yeah.
Good.
They're
And what
one
do
of
they
my
have?
toughest ones to fit, to be honest.
So they have this high neck set, right? High withers, and then where the saddle sits, then you got that lower back. So they're like this, unless they are horses who have sway back and stuff like this. But where the saddle sits is the opposite of the quarter horse. Make sense so far? Okay.
Yes.
So let's not focus so much of the different breeds, but it affects it. Okay, it affects it. So in order to stay in the little timeline we have, we're going to come to the next part of the pen trick, which is the wither clearance. When I hear wither clearance, and when you do, and you talked about wither clearance in your schooling, Lizelle, what do you remember you have been taught about the withers? Can you fill us in a little bit?
Yes, well, I think I can't remember the exact terminologies around it, but essentially you have the wither, which is obviously a very sensitive area that needs enough clearance, but also the side of the withers as well. So it's a lot of people just think of the top of the spine and what rests on it, but they very much forget that the side of the withers actually have very sensitive muscles and nerves that shouldn't be affected. And I think also two things on this is, I think I always tell clients that just because you have clearance without the rider on doesn't mean you'll have clearance once the rider's on. So it's very important to check them in both scenarios.
Absolutely wonderful. Okay, so I love how you explained it, because that's exactly what I wanted you to do. Because in Pony Club, every rider knows they can't sit on top. But not all the people have been explained that the side of the withers is just as important, if not more important. Because on top, is if I hit my knuckles together, I make a sound. That's okay. But I can't do that for 30 minutes or 2 hours, depends how long I ride. So the horse will complain very fast. I don't like it. They rear you off, they're not going forward, they throw themselves down. Or the horses who have absolutely high pain tolerance, you take the saddle off, the whole saddle pad is bloody and the skin rips shut open. Right? So this kind of wither clearance, most people understand. But what you mentioned, the side, most people don't. Why do you think that is?
I think firstly because it's so common. I mean, I think it's one of the biggest reasons I tend to fail saddles and fittings is because they just don't give that clearance on the sides. And then many clients, it's like the first time they've ever heard of it. So I do think it's just, it feels like the majority of the saddles I come across don't even allow for that clearance. So I think everyone's just accepted it and is used to it at this point. Okay.
So we just talked about horses being so expensive, right? And we talked about doing something where the rider knows it's a saddle is very frustrating. I think after I did the stirrup bar test, I need to go to see, is my saddle wide enough in the withers? And as you said, by the time I have the saddle pad on, the thickness of the saddle pad, the girth and the rider, the whole picture changes. So what is my starting point? What is my starting point for me to create that clearance I'm looking for? For example, let's say you have a massive ranch and your roads are not as smooth, they're going up and down. And he says, my ranch vehicle needs to have a little bit clearance between the bottom of my car to the top of the car, otherwise I bottom out all the time. Or my wheels hang on the air and then they spin and I don't go anywhere. So the first thing you said, this is the terrain, I need a car which sits higher. Would that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, so think in that term. So if I have a rider who is really heavy, like me, 250 pounds with my clothes and the saddle, so there's a lot of weight going on the horse. I need more clearance to the bottom of the road because I need more wither clearance because once I sit down, there's a lot of clearance. So let's say we're not talking about a little kid who starts riding who weighs 30 pounds or people who are over 200 pounds, the average rider, right? So let's talk about the average rider. And what I want you to do is show me your pen and hold it up with the pin in the air here.
Okay.
Okay. So pretend this is your windshield wiper and you go back and forth. Go ahead. Okay. Now you do the same thing upside down and you go to the back and you just do a quarter turn like this. Okay. Okay. So now you do the same thing except you go to the horse. You put the hand at the end of the mane. The remaining is probably 10 centimeter and then the pen goes down to the narrow point. Do not make the mistake, put this in. They hate to be scratchy. It feels like a mosquito or a horsefly is ready to land and poke them. This way they will never feel the point. Okay, and you don't scratch the saddle. This scratches the saddle. So you have the horse, you put the saddle on the withers. When you have the pen on the top of the withers where the mane ends, you bring that pen towards the tail and bring it back and forth. Try this without the saddle first. So behind me here is this little saddle stand. Okay, pretend this is where the shoulder blade is, where these red lines here, this is where the mane is, and this is where the mane ends. So check out what happens when you do that. See how I put my pen on top, my hand on top of the withers?
Yeah.
Okay, and you see how it runs in that triangle? In that triangle, 3 inches, 7.5 centimeters, are the most sensitive nerves. So if you go 2.5 centimeters down, or 1 inch, 4 inches, this is what they call the 4-inch handbrake. If you want a horse to refuse a jump, lift up the head, bite you, don't go forward, stumble, get a hollow back, get really aggravated, all you need is to pinch that triangle. Because that's what stallions bite, not just here, also on top and more forward, because those nerves running along since 35 million years on these horses. Have you ever seen somebody pick up a little kitten?
Yes.
And what does a
way that
kitten
the
do?
mom picks it up, or like a
Huh?
way of
Yeah. Thank you. The way the mom picks it up. What happened to the kitten?
It's fine.
Okay, but what is the behavior of the kitten?
Oh, it freezes.
It freezes. So there is this kitten. Have you ever seen a human pick up a kitten? I have. But I have never seen a human take a stick or a pen or a horsewhip, hold the kitten on one hand and says, "Kitten, come on, move. Kitten, come on, move." If I would see it, I would punch that person out. Right? I would get so mad. But we do it with horses all the time. The horse meant to freeze when the stallion bites there. He does it when he fights for the herd, when he disciplines the youngsters, or when he breeds the mare. Because there's a chain reaction. This nerve is called the ulnar nerve, and it travels to your pinky. When you hit your funny bone, or the nerve, the ulnar nerve, you feel it in your pinky nerve, a chain reaction. If you get pinching there, that drops the rib cage, that pinches the main nerve branch called the brachial plexus, and that then gives intermittent shock waves to the leg, which could give intermittent lamenesses to the horse. If I'm a polo player, the last thing I want to be the last horse on the ball. I want my horse to go forward. So why, if give another example, let's say I'm a car racer. Why would I want to race my car with the handbrake on? First of all, my car stinks because I burn all the brake pads, but also I will never win the car race. So why in the world would I want to pinch this triangle? There is a reason for it, right? Like you said last time, the saddle fitting is getting pretty dark out there when we talked about the forward-facing 3 points, right? So certain saddles particular put this on, especially in the last 30 years when we have a lot of people who finally have the money, the time, the kids at university, but they buy horses which they can't ride. There's not a lot of people out there, but there's a lot of people who have a lot of money and they want the best barn, the best car, the best saddles, the best horses, but they have just started to ride. They can't even do a sitting trot on an Icelandic. Okay, so all my point, or I'm trying to say, it's not they're bad people. Riding is a skill what you need to learn over a long time. And sometimes they buy these big moving horses, but they can't sit them. It's kind of like your best friend just got her driver license and she gets the Ferrari and goes on the road and starts driving on the highway. So we don't do this with our children, give them the most powerful vehicle to learn how to drive, but we see it a lot in the horse industry. So what does the horse industry do? We build saddles to slow down the horse, right? So there are saddles who deviate from the most common rule in the market. Every saddle manufacturer who use saddles with spring steel, we call them spring trees, they're always 5 inches apart because we never want to set them on the spine or on the multifidus muscles. In the Western world, they have never deviated it. They never deviated. Let me get you a Western tree. You see a Western tree, what we call the fork. Okay, and the distance from here to here calls the fork width.
Yeah.
And from here to here, we call it the bar angle. So when you see it in the Western saddle, I get it. I make sense. Fork width, bar angle. In the English tree, we use the same words, and this is why it's so complicated or misunderstood. See this corner here? Okay.
Yeah.
We call that tree width.
Yeah.
And then here where the spacer is, you can see how the tree is interrupted on the gutted plate. This company allows you to do left or right, different changes in the angle, tree angle. So when people talk about your tree is too narrow, I need to ask, did you mean the tree width or the tree angle? And people say, I don't know. I have 5 gullet plates. They have different colors, and they just say narrow, medium, wide, extra, extra wide. So here you can see it too. See how it kinks here a little bit? That's the tree width. From here on, they make the angle wider. So let's focus not on the angle, let's focus on, is this wide enough? How do I know my tree width? Or if you have an army saddle, western saddle, packing saddle, the fork width is wide enough. Let's focus on this. Let's use the pen trick for the tree width. Okay? So we already know what to do with the pen when we go on here. Okay? So now let's grab a saddle. And as an independent saddle fitter, you will absolutely agree with me that the starting point of we call that the vertical panel.
Yeah.
From the center varies. Some are very high, some are very low. But you want to hear something funny? Never, never, never you see it on a saddle from Buenos Aires, from Pakistan, no matter where they make in the cheapest countries or the most expensive Western saddles in Germany or in the States or in Canada. The distance from this knuckle to the start of the bar, it's 99% 5 inches. That's 12.5 centimeters. Check this out. Like a pencil. So, if my gullet plate shouldn't hit the withers, we're talking about an average rider, okay? Not heavier riders, okay? You want at least 2 finger clearance. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So the distance from here to the bottom of the triangle, so 2.5 centimeters and 10 centimeters is what? 12.5 centimeters. 5 centimeters. So in the old days, they all were designed so they never have that problem to hit the triangle. So why do we still have different fork width? Because just like you've seen as a fitter, there's sometimes horses with very narrow chest, medium chest, and very wide chest. And the wider the chest or the narrower the chest, that shows up on the top on the shoulder width. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Now, I know this is painfully slow for you because you've been through the training and you understand all that, but I'm pretending you never heard about saddle fitting because our viewers most of the time haven't seen what you already seen every day. And when I show this to the customer, says, yeah, I have 2 beautiful Hanoverians, same lineage, same mare, same stallion, but one has a chest like this and one like this. I have 2 daughters. One is this, one is this. I have 2 brothers. One is this, one is this. Not in the stomach, in the shoulders width. So you can have the same mare and the same stallions, but you can have different width. So if we have that, I need to know, do I have enough clearance for the shoulders to come through? We talked last time about shoulder freedom. It's what people do is just moving the arms, like what people think, oh, I want my horse to move their arms or the front legs. We want the shoulder to not interfere. They can't have shoulder freedom if I don't check first my width. So the hard part for me, when I go out and fit a saddle, they have deviated from the saddle fitting rules, what has been fitted for hundreds and hundreds of years. So they bring the panel very high up there. The higher they bring the vertical panel up here, okay, so narrow the space. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so the question is, why do they make that high? Why did they deviate it from it? I know my horse's spine has a certain width. I know my horse's shoulder width and angle and so on and so forth can vary. But why do I make one saddle what is always narrow on top, no matter what horse I have? Have you ever figured this out?
I have, my assumption is just this like illusion of stability. You know, if the
Yes.
saddle can stick onto the horse, essentially, then the rider feels safer, they feel more stable, but the horse can't really move. So I don't know if it's that. Because I think that's also one of the reasons in polo why 99.9% of the polo saddles don't give that freedom. It's because the rider wants that stability on top of the horse, but it comes with a
That
lot
saddle
of...
back there, that's a polo saddle.
Yeah.
Okay, super narrow tree width because they bring the panel very high. So what they call it the clothespin fit. So they, just like a clothespin, pinches your towel on the laundry line so it doesn't fall off. And they have one size fits all.
Yeah.
And most likely you won't play on your Frisian polo. They have a certain polo ponies. But here comes an interesting fact. Have you ever thought about the difference between polo and polo cross? Have you heard about that?
Yes.
What,
Well, I've actually
Okay.
used to play polo cross, so
yeah, and what does the saddle look there?
I actually have my mom's old one in the corner over there.
Show it.
That's not a
Bring
great
it to the.
example of a good saddle. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
not a.
But if you just bring it, I bring this saddle and then we compare, because I
Okay.
like to make a point here.
There we go.
Okay. All right. So this saddle there, show it from the side, sideways. See, the typical polo saddle is nothing, right? And look at
Yeah.
how much stuff you got on the side and how much deeper your saddle is, right? But it's built on this particular one on a saddle what has more freedom in the front. Some of them look like a Western saddle. They all have wider gullets, and some of them have this point from here to here, 12.5 centimeters. Now, the one I have here has a very narrow channel, maybe okay for a cat, and look how high that is and how narrow that is.
Yeah.
They come in and then they go out. So they really pinch like a clothespin on the withers. So in general, you need
Not a great
6.
example because this
No,
is not for.
that's no. So I thought you had one of those. They look like Western saddles, but they don't have a horn.
No, this one
So-
is really old. This is, I think, 40 years old, and
Yeah.
it's like sentimental to my mom. So I think she wanted me to like clean it up and have it as decoration somewhere.
Well, yeah, I totally understand how that can be. So the person who I worked along a lot with from Australia and played heavy duty competitive polo cross, he showed me his. And it really did look like a Western saddle, but with English stirrup leathers and no horn, right? And he says, we usually have 3 horses in polo. The other horses, when you go polo cross, have 6, right? So they're going through horses much faster. So we have also polo players here in Canada who play really active, but both of them are veterinarians. And I had to rebuild back then when I met them completely their polo saddle. Because for them it makes absolutely no sense. Why don't we adopt what they do with polo cross saddles in Australia? Base it on a frame what stays away from here. So when you check the wither clearance, because we're talking about the pencil trick, check first how far is this panel down the side. Most of the time, when this is not down far enough, okay, look how much this comes up where it should end. Okay, that's all in the triangle.
Yeah.
These saddles, certain brands, are meant to pinch the withers. They're exactly built to this. For exactly what you said, false stability. Manufacturing is perfect because I can sell one saddle fits all, typical for the French style saddles. It was very popular. Some of them are 14,000 euros. So convert that into rand and it makes your head spin. Then there are some saddles who are very, very popular, also meant to sit there. Maybe it's to slow down those expensive horses, so for the adult amateur rider can say, oh, my beautiful horse goes, I can sit the trot because their back doesn't move. They're just moving the legs.
Yeah.
A good moving horse moves through the back. One of the greatest horsemen I've ever met, one of the most highly educated people who still lectures worldwide, said to me, the horse industry goes down the hill because everybody wants to ride the leg movers.
Yeah.
Real horse people want to move and ride the back movers. A back mover is harder to ride. I don't sell a lot of saddles to it. So if the majority of the riders, adult amateur riders who now start riding, not like you and me as kids, right? Fear is there, control the movement in the back, it's quieter. Have you ever ridden an Icelandic horse or gaited horse?
I have actually, and we did it with our saddle fitting trainings. We had the opportunity to try some, which is actually very rare for a South African to say, so I think that was very cool.
Yeah, and how nice is it to can have your beer glass and go very, very fast. It doesn't move.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Right? So it's a complete different action. So as the saddle fitter, I need to understand what am I fitting there? And as a horse owner, what do I want? Do I want a horse that goes really hollow? Doesn't move? Okay. Maybe I don't want it. Maybe my saddle purposely made to do this. So the first thing you're going to check is check with your pen, where does the vertical panel start? Okay. No Western saddle you will find where the bar will start, right? Will start there.
Yeah.
None. They all start 12.5 centimeters.
I think this
Isn't
is
it
really
weird?
great visuals because a lot of the challenges I have with clients is they'll try and find saddles to source for a fitting, and then a lot of the times they've kind of wasted their time bringing 5 saddles to a fitting that would never be approved. But if you just know a few little things about how saddles should at the very least be manufactured, you don't have to look at the stuff that's a waste of time.
Yeah. Unless you want that purposely pinch the withers and want the horse to be engaged and has that false elevation. It's a massive market, right? A lot of money you can make in selling the horses and selling the saddles. It's a big market. But if you belong to 78% of the horse owners who have horses because they're so passionate, they love them, and they want their horse to last long, don't have all the suspensory and kissing spine and all the garbage what comes with the problem. This is not stuff I pull out of my nose. This is something what is being shown over and over again. We just need to be really realistic. Certain pills are meant to keep you semi-healthy, so the pharmaceutical company can sell a lot of pills. We all heard that story.
Well, very interestingly, me and some of my other equestrian friends often talk about how it just feels like there's no sound horses anymore. Like it just feels like there's so many broken horses, and they keep going like, why? Did we just know less in the past? Are we just more aware now? And I genuinely think a lot of it is just the lack of the right equipment, the lack of horsemanship, everything we're discussing essentially is slowly breaking horses apart. I think there's many other things involved, like breeding potentially and things like that, but I just think it's like a perfect storm for these animals just not to be healthy anymore. And it's, it's very alarming.
And it's a big industry, right? Everybody wins. Right? I have more osteopaths, more chiropractors, more veterinarians. Don't get me wrong, these people are needed, but not purposely done by a saddle. We're talking about saddle, right? So yes. I can easily put my pen to the middle of the saddle and see, does this start below the 12 or not? If you have a saddle what doesn't, so that was the number 2 pencil trick. don't do number 3 pencil trick, because number 3 pencil trick will never fit, never work. There's 15 companies who have interchangeable gullet plates. Some are shorter, some are longer. They're never meant to fit the side of the withers. All right, let me prove you why. So once you are comfortable by putting your pen in your hand or pencil, put it at the top of the withers with the main ends, and you're comfortable by doing the windshield wiper trick. Then you put the saddle on, you put it on the highest point of the withers, you look for the D-ring. 9 out of 10 saddles have their D-ring in front of the gullet plate. You slide it back until the D-ring lines up with the end of the mane. 9 out of 10 horses have the edge of the shoulder blade there. This is just rough, okay? You have been trained way more specific. This is for our audience and your audience to see, where do I even put the saddle before I put the girth or the saddle pad on or the rider, okay? Start with this. This is what I call, I have a rough road in my big farm, so I want a car with a high frame so I don't butt motor the car. So if I have a high rider, I need specifically lots of room here and on the side, because the heavier the rider, so more it comes down. Makes sense, right? All right, definitely. So here I put my pen where I had before. I can't even get that down. Look how much my pen bends. Can you see that in the internet there, in the page here? Mm-hmm. Look how much it bends. I can't even get that down. Imagine the girth.
Interesting about that is a lot of people believe they have that freedom because the horses have already lost so much muscle behind in that area of the atrophy that sometimes you can get the pencil through, but it's just because there's literally no muscle there.
Yeah. And what happens when you put on top? It just falls into a no man's land. It's like you say, look how balanced the piece of wood, like say you have a wide board. You lay it on the mud. Look how nice and balanced, doesn't go anywhere. The second somebody steps on that piece of wood, they sink in the mud with the wood. Right? If the base, the muscle is not there, it just falls into the horse. So here's where a saddle goes on. I put it on the shoulder, I put it back, same wither clearance, even if I push down. Okay, like the other one, got 3 to 4 fingers. If it's good or not doesn't matter for now. I just want you to talk about it, and I want you to see the visual. Put my pen on the withers, and now nothing. I look through it, and it sits, if this is the red zone, my fingers, the owie zone, and this is the saddle, it sits here. So now in movement, these muscles can move. The other saddle was sitting like this, hanging, pinching, grabbing the side of the withers, not even making contact here. So that is how I check the number 3. That is how I check the tree width. If my saddle has been built with the correct start of the vertical panel.
Yeah, and
now,
that picture you show as well with the second trick with actually the saddle stand and how you've painted it, that's a really nice picture because I think so many people don't realize how far back that muscle really goes, because even sometimes you can see on the sides, they're like, oh, but there's space on the sides, I can put my 2 fingers there, but you need to be able to go all the way in. So I think this is a very good visual. Good.
All right, so now that we talked about the 3 pencil tricks, we need to continue this another time because I run out of money, time. I run out of money all the time. No, I'm just kidding. But I run out of time, so we need to pick this up another time. But I think if you start with those 3, you will see, as a rider who loves their horse, you might need to completely rebuild the bottom of the saddle or start with another one if you have a saddle that is meant to bite the withers on purpose, badly designed, or purposely slow down the horse because I want to give this false security of stability. Maybe the manufacturer wanted to have a saddle, and that's one of the most popular sayings you hear from retailers or manufacturers. Oh, my saddle fits all horses, right? So if you can't adjust the gullet plate, how is that possible?
Exactly,
Right?
yeah.
Next time we will have all the solution to it and what I can do as a customer, as a fitter. But at this stage, a little bit my fault because you and I had such a good conversation before we hit the record button. But let's pick that up next time where we left off. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And I think also just as a starting point, a lot of people ask the question and they're very confused by why there's so many saddles on the market that don't fit horses. And I think diving into these topics in this way, I think it just becomes a bit more clear to people what the challenges are, but also just enabling owners to make those decisions so you can just empower yourselves. Because yes, there are unfortunately fitters that sell these saddles too. So it's important to take some knowledge into their own hands as well.
You know what cognitive dissonance is?
Yes.
Right? So sometimes I fall into this trap. Or your customer falls into this trap. So what you're going to do, you ask something completely different. Okay? Nothing to do with horse or saddles. You say something like this. Have you ever heard about diet pills? Yeah. Have you ever heard that every single diet pill works? No, there's millions and none of them work. So the majority of the people know that there's a lot of diet pills and they don't really work. But why are they selling? Why are there so many diet pills? That you don't have to go with diet specific when the person is a little heavier, because they might take it personally. But in the reality, we know in order to push a lot of money through an industry, not everything is meant for the purpose they're selling it to.
Yes.
Does it make sense what I'm trying to say? So find some analogy, different things.
Not everything's ethical, I think, is also what people need to understand.
Now that's a massively big can of worms to open, and I had a wonderful conversation with a lady who owns the riding facility in Georgia. And she was a huge competitor in the States. And she said to me, you know, the equine industry is in danger, because they're leaving the horse industry, the riders, the horse lovers, leaving by the busloads the industry. Because there comes stuff out what is not ethical. And people don't want to be associated, seeing or being compared to people who have a little kitty and been hitting the kitty. Because that's, in the end, what you do. When you have a saddle that pinches the horse not to go, and you hit the horse or you jam your spurs or your leg in, the horse is meant to freeze. And you keep hitting him. And when I say this to people, people start whining, and not whining, but tearing up because they feel so bad. They felt it, but they have never been compared to a kitty hitter. Yes. Right? So not that I would ever do that to my client. But once you understand this, the customer says, I don't want to have that interface saddle ever on my horse again, because I want something from Lizelle. What? Bypasses like they're done in the old days, when the horse was meant to help the humans to survive and conquer the country or plow their fields. They made equipment to their investment, their horse, tractor today, their horse, car today, their horse did not get crippled from the equipment. They did it in order to make it easier for the horse and rider. Not today anymore. We like to say it, but you hit the nail on the head. It's not ethical. I make you to believe it is, but it isn't. And that's why people get really angry. And they should. Lizelle, as always, you have this magic in me. Keep me in this. I told you right away, I cannot talk more than half an hour, 45 minutes. It's an hour again. But it's so much fun talking to you, because you're on the same wavelengths as I am. And I can't wait to talk to you next time.
Sounds amazing. Thanks so much. Good luck with the next session.
Okay, bye-bye.